After 2 years of war and bloodshed, this was a day of raw emotion. For the families of the 20 living Israeli hostages that had been held by Hamas, their loved ones are home. Ronen Ohel's brother Alon was abducted from the Nova Music Festival and released after 738 days as part of the ceasefire deal.
I was so nervous to meet him in the first time, and it was so exciting and moving. There is no words to describe how we feel. The best day of my life, really.
In Gaza and the West Bank, there was also joy. More than 1,900 Palestinian prisoners were released by Israel.
My son has been in prison for 2 years. Do you know what 2 years means? May God bring peace to all their hearts, and may every one of them inside be comforted and freed soon.
Some reunions almost seem to defy belief. This is when Avi Natan Or saw his girlfriend for the first time in 2 years. He was released Monday. Noah Agamani was also a hostage, rescued in June 2024. Vision of her being abducted on a motorcycle from the Nova Music Festival as he watched was some of the most chilling from the October 7th attacks. This was Israeli hostage Evyatar David in a video released by Hamas in August. He spoke about not eating for days and digging his own grave. He survived and was one of the Israeli hostages released. Of the Palestinians released, about 250 had been serving long prison sentences in Israel, and about 1,700 had been detained during the Gaza war. Mohammed Hatib said he spent 20 years in prison, convicted of killing 3 Israelis. I'm very happy. It's indescribable, he says. On a day of high drama in Israel, there were celebrations with each appearance of a returned hostage on television screens. Then U.S. President Donald Trump took center stage.
His Excellency Donald J. Trump to address the Knesset.
The U.S., along with Egypt, Qatar, and Turkey, mediated the first phase of the Israel-Hamas ceasefire.
We welcome you here to thank you for your pivotal leadership in putting forward a proposal that got the backing of almost the entire world. A proposal that brings all our hostages home.
This is not only the end of a war, this is the end of an age of terror and death and the beginning of the age of faith and hope and of God. It's the start of a grand concord and lasting harmony for Israel and all the nations of what will soon be a truly magnificent region. I believe that so strongly. This is the historic dawn of a new Middle East.
The U.S. president then made the short trip to Egypt for a summit to make those ambitions a reality. He and co-host Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi met with more than 20 world leaders aimed at making the ceasefire a permanent peace deal.
We've all agreed that supporting Gaza must be done to lift up the people themselves, but we don't want to fund anything having to do with the bloodshed, hatred, or terror, as has happened in the past. And for the same reason, we're also agreed that Gaza's reconstruction requires that it be demilitarized and that a new, honest civilian police force must be allowed to create a safe condition for the people in Gaza.
But as Donald Trump headed back to Washington, many questions about whether this summit will be a breakthrough remain. Neither Israel nor Hamas attended, and already there are reports nearly 30 people have been killed in clashes in Gaza between Hamas and an armed clan. But for now, these are the images that will resonate around the Middle East and the world.
Middle East correspondent Eric Torczek joins me now from Jerusalem. Eric, along with those pictures that we saw today of hostages and captives going home, there was another even darker business at hand, which was the demand that Hamas return the bodies of the dead hostages. I think only 4 have been restored so far, sent back to Israel. What happens if Hamas misses the deadline to find and send back the rest?
Sarah, Hamas has already missed the deadline, but that was expected. Where the surprises have come have been that Hamas didn't return 24 bodies. Israeli officials were expecting they'd have trouble finding some of the bodies and accessing the sites where some of the bodies have been buried, but they didn't think it would be 24. This is more than they expected. There's meant to be an international coordination mechanism, a task force that's been formed that also involves Qatar, Turkey and Egypt, as well as the US, that's designed to help recover the bodies and allow for them to be brought from areas of Gaza that Hamas had to leave in the face of the Israeli invasion of the north of Gaza. But it's taking longer than everybody expected, and as I said, there's more bodies that Hamas hasn't returned that Israel is suspicious about its motives for doing so, perhaps holding on to some bodies they think as leverage, or some they might genuinely not be able to access. But there's going to be a process now. The Israeli authorities, the Israeli military, Israeli intelligence services have provided coordinates to that international task force where they think some of the burial sites are, and the IDF, which remains in Gaza, still occupying 53% of Gaza, has put what it calls prevention orders on certain parts of the strip, not allowing any reconstruction to take place until there's been some efforts to try and find any potential burial sites for the remains of those hostages. So once that process has finished, we'll have a better idea of how many bodies still need to be returned to Israel and whether all of them are going to be sent back.
Now, we just referenced in Norman's story there that there have been reports of clashes between Hamas and I think one of the most powerful clans operating in Gaza. How much do you know from where you are about that situation on the ground?
So what we've heard inside Gaza was that Hamas has been trying to reassert itself in several areas, and it's been attacking the Dagmush clan, which was, you know, there are strong families and tribes in Gaza who kind of have their own armed gangs and authority outside of the Hamas structure. And Dagmush were one of the key rivals to Hamas. So Hamas, as soon as it could, sent, you know, fighters back in to try and reassert control and attack that clan, accusing them of being collaborators with Israel. And it's done this in other areas, it's done this in other instances. It did this during the first ceasefire that we saw earlier this year. So what Hamas does in these occasions when the Israeli troops pull out is try and reassert control right across the areas that the IDF has left in Gaza Strip, try to eliminate rivals. It justifies it by saying these are collaborators with Israel, but really this is also an exercise in control, in saying we are still here, we are still the main force in Gaza, and we're the dominant faction on the ground.
And Eric, I mean, briefly, this is a difficult thing to say to you briefly, but there was this summit in Egypt today. What do we expect in the days ahead? Now we're into the extremely complex business of establishing the next phases of peace.
And the governments involved haven't given a lot of detail, Sarah, about what's happening. We've only heard from Egypt and from Qatar, for example, that there's teams now working on the technical aspects of what President Trump called phase 2 of the deal. He said phase 2 has now begun. Once the hostages came out and the prisoners were released, he said this is phase 2 now. But when those steps are going to actually occur, like the international force to secure Gaza, like disarming Hamas, clearly that's a long way off. We don't actually know, but apparently the teams are talking. Qatar has said its teams are working around the clock. Turkey has teams involved. The US Central Command is sending 200 staff to Israel as part of a coordination and oversight mission, and we don't know exactly when that's going to start. So there are a lot of different elements that still need to take place, including another conference in Egypt about the reconstruction of Gaza. So clearly taking funding bids and commitments about how that reconstruction is going to work. Tomorrow, the Rafah crossing is going to open happen between Egypt and Gaza as well. So there's a lot of different things that are yet to happen, but it's very, very complex work that needs to take place.
Eric, thank you very much indeed for that update. Thanks.